I think as enthusiasts, we all have that one watch that we maybe never committed to, but we have always looked at from a distance, that we return back to at least a few times every single year and ask, how is it doing? Now for me, one of these particular watches has always been the Globemaster. And I guess there's a lot of me tied to it. There's a lot of nostalgia. It's a watch that a few years ago I wanted to gift my dad. Life had another plan on that one. But this piece still remains as one of the most underrated modern Omegas in existence. And I want to try and understand why that is. Too often, we get hooked on models that made the biggest dents in the 1950s. This period in time, it really was a turning point in the way that we view watchmaking today. Now, since we're covering Omega, so naturally we would cover the larger-than-life watches like the Speedmaster and the Seamaster. They're always front and center. They're always the main focus of any discussion. But another gem that preceded these was the Constellation. And we know that these watches, frankly, are some of the most beautiful watches that the brand has ever made, especially when we look at their timeline. I want to cover what I argue to be one of the most undervalued, underrated watches in Omega's catalog, and I still don't understand the reason why the Globemaster is not a watch that they themselves promote more. It deserves it. See, the issue with the Omega brand, as we have always talked about, is they pump out so many watches that they can't even keep track on the many variants that are out there. The Seamaster has so many spin-offs and lineages. The Speedmaster, I mean, forget about it. But the Constellation, only a handful. And it turns out that 2025 is the 10th anniversary of Omega's modern Globemaster. This really is an anniversary year for Swatch Group, and too many of the brands under the umbrella have used it to their advantage. And when this happens, what do? They create limited edition watches in precious metals that none of us can afford. I'm not pointing any fingers, Blancpain, Breguet. So the Globemaster, it's an odd sounding name, isn't it? I bet there's a few of you out there that don't even know that this watch exists, and I don't blame you. It doesn't sound anything remotely like Constellation. And I didn't know this up until now, but until 1956, the first 4 or so years of the Constellation's life in the United States, there was a trademark disagreement, and because of that, the Globemaster name was used instead of Constellation. The name itself doesn't make a lick of sense, does it? But we are talking about the 1950s here. Nothing really made sense. We forget that at the time these brands were pulling out all the stops to create watches and sell them no matter what. Anyway, I digress. We're always learning useless bits of information on this channel, and I love it. Thing is, when we look at the modern Omega family, we have Seamasters, Speedmasters, we have a Constellation. We are talking about the Globemaster today, right? This one. See, what is so odd is that Omega today does produce a Constellation. And it's not the Globemaster, it's an entirely different watch. It looks more like the Manhattan, a watch that was made in the 1980s. And we can see all the small little nuances that made this watch unique in that way. Integrated bracelets, other little details. That alone, we can measure that the cause of the divide, the reason why we don't hear about the Globemaster, is that it's being suppressed by other watches like the Constellation. Even within Omega's ranks, there is a dispute about which is which. And if Omega cannot classify what these watches are, I mean, how are we supposed to? Anyway, the history of Omega's Constellation, it was a brilliant one. It was their premium timekeeper. Its origins go as far back as 1948, where it was named the Century, because wouldn't you believe, it's on a par with Rolex's Datejust. This Century, this predecessor, was made to celebrate Omega's 100th birthday. But production and the name Constellation only arrived in 1952. And what made these such brilliant watches of their time? Well, compared to today where we have pieces that are beefed up with super cases and crown guards and water resistance, it was all about performance and elegance, how well they looked and how well they kept time. It was a simpler time with simpler tastes, right? I think of the classic sports cars of the 50s and 60s and we get a similar sort of feeling. Defining characteristics of the classic Constellation, it was divided into two periods, 50s to 60s, 60s to 70s. The 1950s, it was all about the pipe hand dials, those gorgeous plots, sector dividing lines, bumper movements. And we will see often that the best lines in the family, they all had a star at the bottom of the dial, which indicated, the very early models at least, they were observatory chronometers. And of course, that iconic observatory symbol on the case backs of these watches with 8 stars, I think denoting different awards that Omega received over the years for their movements. But the thing I didn't know about the Constellation in the early years, there were tiers dividing them. You had the Constellation, the Deluxe, the Grand Luxe. Basically the divide between steel, gold, and platinum and the sorts of bracelets and straps that would be fitted to them. So we move into the 1960s, I think 1964, and we see this watch experience a radical change. A very time-specific change. The cases adopting more of a cushion style, the bezel now with fluting, the plots, the hands far simpler. And the thing is, both of these styles and designs today, they have a massive fan base. Vintage Constellation collecting is an art in itself. And up until 2015, enthusiasts, they wanted to see the Constellation make a modern return. And when this piece finally did arrive, the reception was a bit all over the place. Not everyone knew what to really classify it as. I think the common complaint was that many were just calling it a Datejust when it first arrived because of the fluted bezel. And if you don't know the history of this watch and what it looked like in the 1960s, yeah, I can understand the claim. What made it so significant when it arrived was that it debuted METAS certification, which is wild when you think about it now. Every single modern piece that Omega makes now falls under METAS certification. Other brands are cottoning onto this too, like Tudor. And when you think of their strategy at this time, debuting this new watch with a classic-inspired design, reinvigorating the Constellation style in many ways, while at the same time debuting new movement specifications and an entire new chronometry standard, this was the best way to do it. Put it in a Constellation, nostalgia. The design of this watch has always fascinated me for so many reasons. There is no secret that I am a big fan of classic inspirations, of reissues. But when a brand is able to take these nuances and make it into a modern piece, that's when they hit the home run. And the proof is in the pudding that a decade later, this watch still looks timeless. It still looks absolutely beautiful. And it irks me that too many people don't appreciate it for what it symbolizes, what it represents. Where do you even start? The paipan, belonging to the 1950s. The cushion-style case and fluted bezel belonging to the 60s. The gorgeous cursive script. The date at the 6 with that coffering around the window. The Constellation star corresponding with the applied logo. I think I'm also a victim of using this word too often, but contemporary doesn't really get the point across enough. And the thing is, Omega as a brand is very sports leaning. They're very focused on more high performance looking pieces today. It just fascinates me that this piece epitomizes an all-rounder, no matter where you go. Even today it is compared next to the Datejust because it does so many similar things. And then they even went a step further and made an annual calendar, which is even better. I still to this day look at it and I think it's one of the best designed modern watches that the brand has put to paper. Following on, that gorgeous script that sits in between all of the plots on this dial, it's perfect. Now I can imagine that this video has been quite unstructured, and it's because I've been sitting here this entire time talking about it and wondering why is it that Omega hasn't made a success of it. We can look up the ladder, up the rungs to Swatch Group and see that the direct issue is linked with. They see that the sales figures and performance figures of the Seamaster and the Speedmaster, they dominate the majority of their market. And where so often we see sports watches being the number one choice of piece to pursue, these, unfortunately, they are always so overshadowed. All these years on, I look at the Globemaster and I say, this is a winning watch. I think there is something about the design of this piece that is so anti-Omega's image nowadays. That it prioritizes elegance over the highly polished, brash, lyre-style lugs, performance-driven pieces, bulbous cases, and an overarching, more aggressive stance. For those who know, we see a piece here that basks in understatedness, that could very easily be someone's one and done. And I think if the brand was to reinterpret these watches a little bit more, enamel dials, play around with the sizes, the thicknesses, upgrade the movements, taper the bracelets and give them a facelift, what an amazing package it would be. I think the state of affairs is that 60s designs, they don't resonate as much as 50s designs do, he says, wearing a 50s inspired watch. So I circle back to that earlier point that I made, that the brand has sort of buried the Globemaster name, which is a great opportunity for you and me, if you appreciate the dress-oriented, the more dress-focused sports watch. I think too often on this channel I talk about watches where wasted potential is an understatement, and here I'm looking at this watch in the face and thinking, why isn't it more popular? And I direct that question to you. Why is it that the Globemaster is a piece that has not taken off? And why is it that Omega hasn't gone back in to make it so? So the reason for the less than remarkable reception of the Globemaster, I think it's just flooded with a litany of issues that is spurred on by the brand. But I think what has also been the issue is that this watch is too simple for its own good. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but relatively, looking at the rest of the watches in Omega's family, yeah, it deserves a bit more excitement. Thing is, from my point of view, this piece deserves to be a success. And I just cannot understand why, with the history that this brand has and the Constellation name is so famous and important, why they haven't made it so. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. See you in the next one.